Once upon a time, there was a king who ruled a peaceful kingdom. He always took care of his people. He made sure their lives were peaceful and happy. The king had a wise minister who gave advice that helped the kingdom grow and prosper. The king admired him greatly and often praised him in the royal court for his wisdom and guidance. The king knew that the minister's wisdom was key to the kingdom's success. The king's admiration for the minister was popular. The minister had earned a special place in the kingdom of the king. Because of this, one courtier had developed jealousy against the minister. The courtier had always wished to be in the position at which the minister was. That is, the chief minister's position in the king's kingdom. But his presence had made the courtier's wish only a dream. And this angered him a lot. One day, in the court, the king praised the minister. And the courtier did not like it at all. This made him furious. The courtier returned home. He was fuming with anger. He saw the servant cleaning and immediately shouted,
"You! Look at this mess!"
The servant looked up, startled.
"But, sir, I just finished sweeping the floor."
"Don't give me excuses!"
The courtier snapped.
"You never do your work properly."
The servant, confused but calm, replied,
"I have done it just as ma'am told me, sir."
"Well, it's not good enough."
The courtier yelled.
"Fix it! And do it right this time."
He turned and went to his room. The servant quietly continued his work. He was not sure why the master had shouted. As the courtier shouted at the servant, his wife watched from the doorway and thought,
"He's furious again. What happened in court this time?"
At night, the courtier sat at the dining table. He was still in a bad mood. His wife, along with the maids, served a wide range of dishes: roasted lamb, stuffed chicken, buttered vegetables, chicken rice, grilled fish, mashed potatoes with garlic butter, and honey-glazed carrots. Freshly baked bread and cheese rolls were served alongside. There were also bowls of fruit and a variety of colorful salads. The dessert table was a dream: rich chocolate mousse, fruit tarts, creamy puddings, honey-soaked cakes, spiced custards, and sticky toffee pudding. The children sat quietly, afraid to speak. glancing nervously at their father. Little John, trying to break the silence, smiled and said,
I think the chicken looks like a giant.
Shut up!
The courtier shouted.
Just focus on your food. And don't talk during the meal.
His wife gave John a gentle look, signaling him to be quiet, while she quietly kept her eyes on her plate. After dinner, the courtier went straight to his room. His wife turned to the maids and ordered,
Clear the plates. And make sure the bowls are cleaned properly. Wipe the table well. And don't leave anything behind.
The maids nodded and began to clean up, while the wife walked to the kitchen. As she boiled water for coffee, she thought to herself,
I should ask him what's wrong. Something must have happened in court.
She took 2 mugs and added 1 teaspoon of ground coffee to each. Once the water was boiling, she carefully poured it into the mugs. Then, she poured about 1/4 of the milk in each and added 1 teaspoon of sugar to each. She stirred the coffee gently, set it on the tray, and headed to the bedroom. The courtier sat on the bed frustrated. The wife placed the tray on the side table and asked,
What happened?
He sighed and replied,
The king keeps praising the minister, but ignores us. Even though we are sharp and honest.
His wife thought for a moment and said,
You should ask him 3 tough questions. If he can't answer them, the king will see he is not as wise as he thinks.
The courtier smiled.
That's a great idea.
The next day, the courtier wrote a letter and handed it to a trusted royal messenger.
Take this to the great scholar in the neighboring kingdom.
He instructed.
Be careful. Keep it a secret. Don't tell anyone where you are going.
The messenger bowed and said,
Yes, sir. I will keep it secret.
Then he left quickly, carrying the important letter. After a long journey, the royal messenger finally arrived in the neighboring kingdom and went to the address written on the letter. He knocked on the door, and a servant opened it. The servant led him inside to meet the scholar. The messenger handed the letter to the scholar. After reading it, the scholar smiled and said,
Please eat something and rest. You have had a long trip.
The servant guided the messenger to a room. The servant then took a tray of food to the messenger, and placing it on the table. The tray contained warm bread, roasted chicken, fresh fruit, and a bowl of creamy soup. The messenger, feeling famished, ate quickly. He then lay down on the bed, soon falling fast asleep. The next day, the scholar handed the messenger a sealed letter.
Take this to the courtier,
He said.
Make sure it reaches him safely.
The messenger bowed respectfully.
Yes, sir. I will deliver the letter safely.
He then left. The messenger arrived at the courtier's house and handed him the sealed letter.
Here is the letter, sir.
He said and left. The courtier opened it, read the contents, smiled to himself. The next day in court, the king addressed everyone, saying,
Our minister is truly the wisest among us. His advice has always brought success.
The courtier stood up and stepped forward.
Your Majesty, with respect, it feels unfair. There are many clever and loyal courtiers here, but only the minister receives your praise. I don't think he is as wise as you think.
The king's face darkened with anger.
How dare you question my judgment? What are you implying? Do you think I can't judge wisdom? Prove your claim or hold your tongue. I will not tolerate this.
The courtier said boldly,
Your Majesty, allow me to ask the minister 3 questions. If he fails to answer correctly, it will prove he is not as wise as you believe.
The king frowned but nodded.
Very well. Tomorrow morning in court, you will ask your questions, and the minister will answer them.
The next morning, in the royal court, the king ordered the courtier,
Ask your 3 questions.
The courtier stood up and stepped forward. His voice was steady.
Your Majesty, these are the 3 questions. 1. How many stars are there in the sky? 2. Where is the center of the earth? 3. How many men and how many women are there in the world?
After the courtier had completed asking the questions, the king turned towards the minister and said,
If you fail to answer the questions asked by our courtier, you will have to resign as the chief minister right at the moment.
The minister nodded in agreement and said,
Your Majesty, I will try to answer these questions to the best of my abilities. And I hope that the answers will satisfy you.
Then he ordered a servant to take a hairy sheep in court. When the hairy sheep came, he looked at the courtier and said,
My dear fellow, the answer to the first question is that there are as many stars in the sky as there is hair on this sheep's body. You are most welcome to count the hair and tell all of us how many stars there are.
For the second answer, he drew a few lines with chalk on the floor and bore an iron rod in it and said,
This is the center of the earth, my friend. If you have any doubts, you can measure it by yourself.
And for the third answer, he said,
It is not possible to count the exact number of men and women, as there are different species too, which are neither men nor women. So first, such species will have to be killed, and then only the number can be counted.